Hello everyone, Inquisitor Vaughn here, and in today's video we are going to continue with our Primarch Project deep dives by going into Primarch Project number 5, designated Jaghatai Khan. So for the list of correspondences for this Primarch Project number 5's designated name would be Jaghatai Khan. The aspect of humanity that I assign to this Primarch Project is freedom. The Legion specialization is fast attack, and the Geneseed organ that I most associate with the Primarch Project and his Legion is the Lymans ear. Primarch Project number 5's gestation pod would land on the civilized feudal world designated Mundus Planus. Mundus Planus was a world that was mostly dominated by a vast feudal empire under the control of a ruler known as a Palatine. Mundus wasn't a highly technological world, but had progressed from the age of technology with gunpowder level technology. This combined with plated armored troops, the use of horses, and massed infantry formations made the Palatine's empire a formidable force. Though the empire covered most of Mundus, the surface of which was mostly ocean besides one large continent, it did not cover all of it. A section called the Empty Quarter was a barren grassland that had little to offer in terms of resources, and it remained as it was only due to that fact. In the Empty Quarter were tribes of Mundian barbarians that constantly fought each other over ancestral lands. There was a kind of class war happening on Mundus, and the Palatine's forces would form hunting parties to occasionally slaughter the Mundian barbarians for sport, and it was relatively easy for them to do since those in the Empty Quarter were not as armed or armored as them. It was in the Empty Quarter on Mundus that Project number 5's pod would land. The project would be found by Ong Khan, the chieftain of a small nomadic tribe called the Talskars. The chieftain believed that the Primarch Project was a gift from the gods and saw the spirit of a great warrior in the child's eyes. So Ong took the child back to his tribe to be raised with his peoples, naming the child Jaghatai. Though the details of this project's upbringing are mysterious, it can be reasonably assumed that the culture of the Talskar tribe, as well as of all the tribes of the grasslands with their constant fighting, influenced it. The father figure of Ong Khan also had a great influence on Jaghatai. Ong Khan was despised by the chieftain of the other tribes because he believed in a time where the tribes would stop fighting each other and be unified. Ong Khan would eventually be murdered by the warriors of another tribe, and though still a youth, Jaghatai led the Talskars in assaulting the tribe of the person responsible, killing every man, woman, and child of the other tribe. After this, he became the Khan of the Talskars, which is how he got his full name, Jaghatai Khan, the Khan part of his name meaning chief or leader. From here, he would attempt to make the aspirations of his father figure a reality, offering the tribes of the Empty Quarter to join under one banner of unity or die. Some resisted and were slaughtered, but many joined the Khan until he had united many of the tribes that had existed previously. Now all of this happened in the Empty Quarter, that small, wild section of the continent that was overall dominated by the Palatine. Sometime later, Jaghatai and his peoples would be moving to their winter grounds when an avalanche would bury Jaghatai Khan. It would be during this time that a hunting party of the Palatine would find the Primarch Project. Only one member of the hunting party would return to the Palatine's domain, and they would bear a note letting the Palatine know that the people of the Empty Quarter were no longer his playthings. Of course, the Palatine did not take this kindly and decided to attack the tribal peoples of the Empty Quarter. Though they were far outnumbered, under the command of Jaghatai Khan, the tribal peoples won the war against the Palatine's forces, killing the enemy in a hail of arrows. Having won the war, Jaghatai Khan was officially the ruler of the empire on Mundus, declared as the Kagan, the Khan of Khans. Soon after this accomplishment, the emperor arrived to Mundus, and the Primarch Project called Jaghatai Khan declared fealty to him, joining the Imperium of Man in the Great Crusade. As I've said before in previous Primarch videos, sometimes the aspect of humanity that the Primarch Project embodied was better demonstrated by their Legion before they were reunited with their Primarch. I believe this is the case with the 5th Primarch Project. It is why I believe that the aspect of humanity that the 5th Primarch Project embodied was freedom. In a similar fashion to the fact that the Primarchs would land on worlds on which they were most needed and would develop their individual talents, the Emperor chose specific populations as initial recruits for the legions because they would complement the nature of the Geneseed. This was the case with the 1st Legion being selected from amongst the physically purest of humanity, with the 3rd Legion being selected from Terran nobility, and the 4th Legion being selected from the gun tribes of Sek Amrak. It is also the case with the 5th Legion as well. The initial recruits for the 5th Legion were taken from the ice wastes of the Thulian Basin region of Terra, which in modern time would correspond to the area in the North Atlantic where Ireland, Scotland, the Faroe Islands, Iceland, Greenland, and Norway all are, but in the setting of the far future are no longer individual islands due to all of Terra's seas having been boiled away during the Age of Strife. The Thulian Basin was actually the name of the area during the Paleogene era that formed one large basaltic lava plain before it was broken up by the opening of the Atlantic Ocean when the supercontinent known as Pangaea was broken up into different continents. The fact that it's named such again in the 25th millennium means that the area was once again a large basaltic lava plain, and considering that the area was called an ice waste, it can be reasonably assumed that the area was a frigid near-Arctic location on Terra. The peoples who lived in this area had survived in the near sub-zero environment through a combination of isolation during the years of Old Night, resourcefulness, and ruthlessness. These conditions would create a tough, survivalist, isolationist collective of swift killers. Though the 1st Legion was the first legion to be created, the 5th Legion was amongst the first legions to be deployed alongside the Proto-Astartes of the 1st Legion, the Imperial armies, and even as far back as fighting ahead of the old Thunder Warrior legions. They were a small legion at the time, only a few hundred, divided into even smaller scout forces that would seek out the remaining warlords of Terra and cause disarray ahead of the Emperor's Thunder Warrior legions and regular mortal forces. These 5th Legion groups would perform this duty independently of one another without contact for extended periods of time, without any other support, often behind enemy lines within the most radiated areas on Terra. The 5th Legion's predecessors were rugged survivalists in this regard, and perhaps this is a reflection of the peoples they were recruited from as well as the nature of their Geneseed. During these early days of the Legion's existence, they had a saying which was also simultaneously a motto: "Each new day is a victory." They were also a notably defiant legion which would often and collectively ignore any order given to them unless it came from the Emperor directly. Given the time that they were deployed, this means that they also defied the Thunder Warriors and possibly even the Custodes. In these early accounts, they are described as free-spirited, but not free-spirited in the sense of creativity or eccentricity as it might be described in modern times, but free-spirited as in they made their own choices unless it came from the highest possible authority above them. They were described as a legion that was never in the middle area of a conflict, never needing acknowledgement, and even taking pride in their sideline style of deployment, which rarely went recorded at the time. In these early days, they were known as Terra's Forgotten Sons. As the Wars of Unification ended and the Great Crusade began, the 5th Legion was amongst the first legions to be sent out into the Sol System and outside of it, divided into many companies serving as pathfinders and pioneers to the expeditionary fleets of the Imperium. It was in this role that they became known as the Star Hunters, because they charted a course through the stars for the Great Crusade forces to follow, though they themselves were not always attributed with many of these discoveries, nor did they always want to be, content with fulfilling their role in the greater scheme of things. Similar to how they were on Terra, they were often isolated from each other and others for extended periods of time with no forms of dependable, consistent communication or resupply means, but it was in these conditions that they developed a unique identity as being resourceful pioneers and raiders who committed to fast attack, hit and run tactics, which assured that they would retain their numbers while inflicting sufficient damage to the enemies in any conflict that they would encounter in these star hunts. It would actually be the Star Hunters who would find the world of Tithonia, where another Primarch project would be found. Freedom is, in my opinion, the aspect of humanity that the 5th Primarch Project embodied, but by that I don't mean freedom to do whatever one wants. I mean freedom as in having a choice in choosing one's own way. It is the freedom of wilderness, the freedom of strength, the freedom of independence, and is, as some would say, at the core of the human identity and longing. Primarch Project 5 was without a doubt shaped by the Talskars and his being raised in the empty quarter on Mundus, but a lot of who he was inherent in his nature. The Khan was brutal and relentless, slaughtering every man, woman, and child of the tribe responsible for his adoptive father's death, and putting the killer's head on a spike above his own tent. The Khan was a conqueror and a natural leader, defeating the Palatine's forces in a hail of arrows and utilizing speed. At the same time, the Khan always presented a choice. As he went throughout the empty quarter, he offered a choice to the other tribes: join us under one banner or die. It was a limited choice, but it was a choice nonetheless. He was creating the conditions of unity and actualizing his adoptive father's dream, a dream in which those who refused unity could not be allowed to live, otherwise they threatened that unity. He faced off against the Palatine and his forces because the Palatine hunted the people of the plains of the empty quarter as if they were animals, and he had the Palatine's head put on a spike above his own hut. This duality, these conflicting themes of noble ideals and barbaric savage means, made the Khan remarkably down-to-earth, human, relatable, and ultimately the embodiment of fierce freedom. It was the conqueror within the Khan that swore fealty to the emperor, because it takes a conqueror to recognize another conqueror, and a far more powerful one at that. Like two predators of different kinds sizing each other up, the Khan determined the strength of the emperor and his forces and chose to join him rather than fight him, knowing that he would lose if he tried and lead his people to ruin. At the time that the Primarch of the 5th Legion was found, the 5th Legion itself had been spread out across the galaxy. The Khan would call them all to Mundus, or Chagoris as the people on the world had called it, to be united under one identity and banner as his legion. When they did gather, the Astartes that stood before him were as diverse as Terra itself, and their armor bore hundreds of different heraldry symbols, as each detachment had become their own individual and isolated group. To unite them all in mind, body, and spirit as his legion, he would lean on the old traditions of the Talskars, having each warrior present take a blade to their own skin in a jagged pattern of however style they chose, but that was reminiscent to the jagged Talskar symbol in some way. Then he would have them change their names to represent the death of their old identity and their beginning as his Talskars, his white scars. The various heraldries of the Legion would instead become the red jagged scar of the Talskar tribe. In this way, I think that Jaghatai Khan embodied the spirit of old tribalism. He was a master of creating and breaking those simple bonds of human connection through symbol and name at its very basic form. Even before the arrival of the Emperor, the Khan was able to break the bonds of loyalty based on bloodline amongst the tribes of the Empty Quarter by incorporating some of each of the tribes into his own Talskar tribe, promoting based on accomplishment and renown rather than previous ideas of hierarchy. Groups were mixed with each other and worked with each other until the only thing that really mattered was that they were the Kagan's people and that they were all loyal to him more than anything else. He essentially did the same thing with his own Astartes legion on Chagoris, breaking down those previous bonds and forming new ones based on loyalty to him and through him to the Emperor, to the point that they called themselves the Horde of Jaghatai. It would later be said that the other Primarchs were either exasperated or frustrated by the Khan and his way of being, but that only Horus Lupercal, Primarch of the Luna Wolves, understood Jaghatai. I think it would be the spirit of tribalism that both Primarchs would share. Khan with the old style tribalism of the Talskars on Chagoris, and Horus with the new style tribalism of gang culture on Chthoniya. It would also be the spirit of the conqueror that both Primarchs would share, the Khan embodying the savage but wise king, and Horus representing the charismatic but treacherous tyrant. It is interesting the overlapping themes of the Khan and Horus, and the frequent overlapping in comparisons in their narrative. If it can be said that each Primarch project had its opposite, the Khan and Horus would be two sides of the same coin. But that is a point that can only be fully understood when I go over Horus later in the series. The Khan's integration into the Great Crusade was relatively quicker than that of other Primarchs. Other Primarchs would remark that the Khan's deployment as the leader of his legion for the Imperium was far too swift and that he needed more time to understand the ideals of the Great Crusade. But the Emperor knew that wasn't necessary. Jaghatai and his White Scars would impose what their heraldry would represent: unity on 1,000 worlds, and be, as their heraldry would emulate, the fast striking lightning bolts of the Great Crusade. The Legion's specialty in war was naturally fast attack, as the Legion would be experts in that style of war even before they were reunited with their Primarch, and the peoples of the Chagorian Plains had used that tactic against each other and the forces of the Palatine for years before the arrival of the 5th Primarch Project. The White Scars Legion would be known for lightning-fast raid and assault aboard bikes and hovercraft, catching enemies by surprise and inflicting massacre. The White Scars had adopted the ways of Chagoris too, not only visually in their new armor style and their aesthetics, but also in how they laughed while they killed, relishing in the slaughter of their enemies and the enemies of humanity during the Great Crusade, enjoying but also deeply honoring with righteous abandon both the hunt and the kill. At the same time, they were encouraged to pursue noble studies such as calligraphy, poetry, storytelling, and hunting. This duality made the Legion a simultaneously cultured and sociable, but savage legion amongst the others. In regards to culture and the adoption of the imperial truth, so much of the Chagorian culture was steeped in superstition that it was hard to get rid of the superstitious practices of the Legion, and this actually caused some conflict with other Primarch projects like Logar. The 5th Legion had always been a multifaceted legion of small groups, and many of these Astartes groups had made their own names and identities. Though as a formal legion, they would all be known as the White Scars and the Horde of Jaghatai. The small groups would later become known as brotherhoods within the legion, with names like the Brotherhood of the Hunter's Star, Brotherhood of the Moon, and Brotherhood of the Summer Lightning. These brotherhoods were little more than bands of 5th Legion Astartes who had fought together in various conflicts. The 5th Legion and the 5th Primarch Project fought with honor and speed during the Great Crusade. However, during most of the Great Crusade, the Legion was embroiled in a conflict against an Orc empire, and it's ironic that such a barbaric legion would face such a barbaric foe for most of the Great Crusade. When the Horus Heresy occurred, Jaghatai Khan did not rush to one side or the other, but in wisdom considered both sides, very similarly to the Lion or Lionel Johnson. His own legion was temporarily and partially torn apart as portions chose opposing sides and fought each other. He would eventually choose to side with the Emperor and the Imperium, even while understanding the reasoning behind Horus and his motivations, and he would stand against Horus and the traitor forces on Terra during the Siege of Terra. Jaghatai Khan would actually survive the Horus Heresy and live to see his legion broken up into chapters by the dictates of Rabute Gilliman, another Primarch project. But in a conflict with the Drukhari Xenos species, the Primarch would disappear, possibly into the warp. The White Scars believe that he still lives and will return to them when the need is greatest. The Astartes Geneseed that I most associate with the 5th Primarch and the 5th Legion is the Lymans ear. It's an organ that replaces one of the ears of the Astartes and which serves two purposes: to enable an Astartes to hear well outside the range of normal humans' hearing, and to prevent a Marine from experiencing dizziness and motion sickness due to accelerated speed. That latter purpose would serve the Legion quite well given their preference of fast attack. And that has been my deep dive into the 5th Primarch Project, designated Jaghatai Khan. Without anything else to be said, Inquisitor Vaughn out. Remember, the Emperor protects and the future is successor.